Hi, I'm Terrell Turner, the host of the Business Talk Library, and today I have a great guest on, Dr. Rebecca Corbin, and she likes to be called Becky, so we're going to have a very good conversation about the exciting things that she's doing with her leadership and how she's impacting entrepreneurship in a nonprofit way. So definitely stay tuned for the episode. So without further ado, let me bring on my amazing guest. Welcome to the show, Dr. Corbin. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really happy to have a chance to chat with you and talk about some of the great work that we're doing.
Absolutely, absolutely. It is a pleasure. And as we were talking before, we hopped on and hit record. I love the fact of how down to earth you are, because you usually don't meet a lot of people that say, "Hey, yeah." Some people call me Dr. Rebecca Corbin, but I kind of go by Becky. So I love that. We're gonna have a great conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Now,
thank you.
before we jump into the details of the amazing work you're doing, you said with that beautiful combination of non-for-profit and entrepreneurship, tell us a little bit about your background.
Great. Well, I have an interesting background. I grew up in the Midwest, so my family is originally from Ohio. My husband and I are celebrating our 25th anniversary this year, so I'm very lucky to have my best friend and my husband. We've lived in different parts of the country, but we are now permanently in the Raleigh, Cary, North Carolina area, where his employer is located, and where my organization, the National Association for Community College Entrepreneurship, NACI, is now headquartered. So that was a quick overview of my life.
Now I have to ask, what part of Ohio were you guys in?
I grew up in Akron, Ohio, so northeastern Ohio, outside of Cleveland. Do you have connections to there?
Yeah, what was funny is my wife and I, we've been in Charlotte for about 3 years, but before that, we were living in Cincinnati, Ohio. We were both working for General Electric there. That's why I was like, Ohio, like,
Oh,
man, small
yeah.
world.
Well, it's interesting. My husband, Mike Corbin, went to the University of Cincinnati. He's an engineer, so that's he tells me all the time how difficult engineering school is, and it's interesting because through my work at NACI, we've done a lot with STEM entrepreneurship and trying to get middle school, both young men and young women from rural areas and from urban areas to be exposed to STEM. And, it's one of my most favorite projects. And he teases me. He said, "You've never been so interesting in engineering until you started doing this work 5 years ago." So I just, obviously Ohio is where my heart is, but we no longer live there. But I'm excited to know that we don't live too far from each other. Terrell, we're on opposite ends of the state.
Awesome, awesome. I mean, speaking of, like I said, the amazing work that you're doing, like, what really led you to the organization and the type of work that you do now?
Well, I would call myself sort of an accidental entrepreneur. I never thought of myself really as entrepreneurial. In fact, I was probably one that liked to be overly prepared and scripted. And what I found myself falling into is my journey through nonprofit. So I started my career working with the United Way system, which I loved, and I love to this day the work that they do. And ultimately, that led me to working for the public television station in the state of New Jersey, NJN, where we lived for a number of years. And I got involved in a project where they were, you probably maybe have seen Ken Burns' series. This one happened to be The War. So this goes back 13, 14 years ago. And I was working there and just loving it and enjoying it, like soaking up every single opportunity of something new to do. And one of the projects through Kane University there was having World War II vets at this time, over a decade ago, were dying at 1,000 a day. So their stories were also, leaving with them. So it was a project where I became acquainted with a community college president who was very entrepreneurial and very vocal about how community college students should have the same opportunities as university students. And I was like, I wanted to find out a little bit more about that. I long story short, I ended up going to work for him at his community college as a vice president, running his foundation and doing workforce. And I just fell in love with community colleges. And I never, ever wanted to work in a different venue. And now, instead of just working for one, I work with over 300, including a growing number of HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities. So,
Wow, that is quite the journey. I always find it very interesting when you hear the story about how someone became an accidental entrepreneur, where it's like they were just focused on solving the problem. And then in focusing on solving that problem, it eventually led them into entrepreneurship. I think that is an amazing story, an amazing journey. So definitely thank you for the work that you're doing.
oh, you're welcome. And thank you for the work that you're doing. We see the world in terms of an ecosystem. And while my alignment is really looking at community colleges as being the catalyst, we don't operate in a vacuum, right? Libraries are important, industry is important, charitable foundations are important, government is very important. So if we're going to really have success and uplift communities and people's lives, we need to kind of get our act together and sort of leverage our strengths so that we're not competing for resources, but the pie is getting bigger. We're working together to open up opportunities for everyone.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, as a part of, like I said, my personal interest when you spoke about, like I said, working on the foundation side, one of the another reason why that interests me is because I also sit on the board for the foundation at Lander University in South Carolina, and really enjoy and love the work that I do on the board there with the different board members. What was that experience like for you of just stepping into your first foundation role, and just how has that kind of shaped you afterwards?
Well, it shaped me in really important ways. And I'll tell you, I took on that role back in 2008. So it was right. Remember the financial downturn at that time. So I had left the public television station, taken this job, and people are like, why would you leave that job? And I saw kind of the writing on the wall with what was happening in New Jersey. And so I stepped into a really interesting opportunity. The foundation at Rowan College in Burlington County in New Jersey had fallen dormant. They didn't really have a leader in there at the time. And so the president said, just use what you need and get things going again. Very entrepreneurial, although at the time I didn't see it as an entrepreneurial opportunity. So we did something that sounds kind of counterintuitive. We had to have stories of students that were benefiting. So we ended up giving away money before we raised any money because we didn't have anything to talk about. So we went on this campaign of, we'd go to New Jersey diners and would find, young people would say, are you going to school? Are you going to community college? Well, here's a business card. If you want a scholarship, open door, come in, see me in the foundation. I'll walk you over to student services. And I'll tell you, that was some of the most fulfilling work that I've ever done in my life. I worked with a board of directors. Many of them, Trell, didn't have college degrees themselves. They were very successful in their fields. There were a couple of bankers who just never earned a bachelor's degree. There was one man who created a manufacturing company, very successful, had never earned a degree. So their passion was really, they wanted to open up the door for others that are principally, people who come to community colleges, which is everyone is welcome, to give them those opportunities. So I think through that, I grew as a person, but I think I really felt my sense of purpose. I mean, it was some of the most gratifying work that I've ever done. I love the people that I worked with. I still keep in touch with the students to this day. And some of them came in through the community college and they're working in New York City. I have some of them, not all of them, but, they keep in touch with me and they tell me about the things that they're doing. And it's kind of like almost as a mom, you have pride of your children, but those are sort of my extended family. And I'm equally proud of everything that they've done. I don't think that they would be where they are today had they not had that experience. And so for me to even be a tiny part of it, just makes me extremely happy, actually.
Wow, that is amazing. I mean, and it's so great, just like I said, to hear the passion and the excitement you have, not only just for your part of the work that you're putting in, but just to see the results that people that you're working with, the people that you're helping, it's amazing to hear that. So I'm curious to hear a bit more about, NACI, and can you help educate us so we understand what AC does now and the amazing work that you're up to now.
Yeah, so NACI is becoming an adult. So in 2022, we will have our 20th anniversary, right? So when I joined NACI as the president and CEO 7 years ago, we were in our teenage years, let's say. So our annual budget was a little over $1 million, and there was lots of opportunity, but we didn't have a lot of branding at that time. We published a magazine, but we weren't really co-creating new things with members. And so I think in the early days, I was looking at the opportunity as tremendous. I mean, the biggest asset NACI has is this robust number of members around the country in all states. So how could we leverage that? But I had to overcome some hurdles in the beginning of funding, for example, because the funding was a bit precarious. We were dependent on one major source of funding. So fast forward, or at least my experience with NACI, we're coming up on our 20th year. Our annual budget is close to $9 million. We give back millions of dollars to our members through the generosity of many large company foundations, corporate social responsibility. But we also act as kind of a quasi consulting firm. We'll take on projects, we'll write reports, we'll conduct studies, not in terms of what a university would do, but on the ground action research, because a lot of our folks have those skills. So we'll assist, for example, the chancellor's office in the state of California. They may be working with a large university, but they need someone to partner with them that can get things done. So that journey in NACI has just amplified my passion for community colleges, and kind of drawing into the nonprofit part of it. I realized that if you are successful in running a nonprofit, and it's got to start with the leadership, it has to start with the leadership, and it has to start with the board. So one of the things, Charles, I'm so proud of, and I know you have a passion for equity as well. When I joined the NACI board, I think we maybe had 4 or 5 board members. They were all men except for one. They were all white. So this year, we're a week away from our annual conference. We are welcoming in 3 new board members. All of them are accomplished presidents of community colleges. We have our first HBCU president from Benedict College in South Carolina. And if you look at our website, NACCE.com, and go to the board tab, you will see this beautiful array of men and women and ages. We have a representative from the LGBTQ plus community who's doing amazing work. So it looks completely different. So as a result, our work, I think, has expanded into an equity agenda, and I'm grateful for that. It does not happen overnight, as you know, with the work that you do. You have to be persistent and you have to work at it. There were times in the early years, I'll tell you, I was like, oh my gosh, why did I take this job? Because if the whole thing falls apart, like, people now know who I am. Like, it wasn't like before when I worked at the college and, if things didn't go well, you could sort of say, well, I'll just do something else. So, but I also look back at those as the most exhilarating times, because that's when you do meaningful work. That's when you take risks. That's when you really kind of get your arms around what is your passion? What have you been brought into the world to do? And I think, for me, I really have a clear vision of what that is. And I know I can't do it alone. I need to do it with other people. I need to do it with the board. I need to have a great staff. I need to have new colleagues and friends like you that I've not met before, but you call me up and you invite me on your program and I say yes. And I try to do my best to help you in ways that might help further you along in your journey, just as you're helping me.
I love it. I love it. It's amazing that, the things that you talked about. And I think just, one of the big things that I took away from a lot of what you were saying is just, realizing how beautifully connected we all are. And as connected as we all are in direct and some indirect ways, sometimes we don't always know how to leverage the value of that connection that we have. And I love the way that you're, through your leadership, and you're just opening people's eyes to the connections, the direct and the indirect connections we have, and also just helping each other just bring that value out. I think that is amazing, and congratulations on the great leadership and the work that you guys are doing of, reaching adulthood as an organization. That's amazing.
No, it is. I mean, it's a milestone, and milestones are important. And I think, I try to be very honest about some of the things that we tried that didn't work well too. And there are times where you either embark on a project, or maybe you see some opportunity in someone that's not there, and you have to kind of own it. And I think that's the part about being a leader. And I was very fortunate. My board supported me getting some coaching from a wonderful coach out in Idaho, of all places. But he really challenged me. I mean, he said, you got to get a good understanding of yourself and what makes you tick. And that's not easy, because I think as leaders and as people, there's a lot of the pieces of us that are tied either to, our experiences, or we may not be as self-aware as we think that we are. And I think coming kind of to terms with that, and knowing it's a process. So I'm going to have great days, and everything goes right. And then there are some days where everything seems like it's falling apart. And how do you keep yourself steadied and moving forward? And I think having trusted friends that you can just really be honest with, because you're not going to bare your soul to all of the thousands of people that we come in contact with. But I know the people that have helped me the most have been the people that have been willing to be vulnerable about things that did not work out, about things that they're working on. So I try to model that for others, especially people in my life that I might play a mentoring role, because I wish I would have leaned into that more earlier in my career, instead of focusing on a problem and feeling isolated and alone. And, oh my gosh, what if somebody finds out? To say kind of what an entrepreneur says, who in my community might I ask advice from? Because people are so generous. That, Terrell. I mean, I'm overwhelmed with the amount of generosity that there is in the world. And I feel like people like us that embrace it, part of keeping the magic moving is you have to constantly give back with no expectation. You're not going to let people take advantage of you. But if I can do something for you that improves your life with no expectation of anything in return, it uplifts me. It makes me happy. It helps me to cope with some of the challenges that we're all facing and dealing with through the pandemic.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And I would say a testament again to your great leadership. Because I always say that it's a sign of a great leader, of someone who can look back and learn from, their successes and what seemed like failure at the time, but that can embrace those and learn from them, and not hide from them. So hats off to you for your amazing leadership. And speaking of your leadership, how can people find the organization if they want to know, what does NACI have going on? What are they up to the latest? Where can they find you guys online?
Yeah, so it's easy to find us online. We are a nonprofit organization, but we don't have an ORG tag. So I always have to tell people that. But our website is nacce.com. So you can go there. And I would encourage people, if you're interested, we are on October 6th having a Future Building Summit. You can find it on the events tab. The Future Building Summit is sponsored by the Corbin Foundation, so there is no cost for it. If you're in Minneapolis, you can join us at no cost. We have elected officials, Secretary of State, senators. We have heads of large foundations that are going to participate. And what we are going to do is a group sort of ideation sharing session. So if you're interested in learning more about entrepreneurship in my organization, feel free to visit us there. You can find out more. While we, focus on service to community colleges, we really lean into the ecosystem as well. We have $135,000 through the generosity of Radcliffe Foundation that we're going to be giving away in a pitch for the trades competition, which will be fun. So if it sparks your interest and you want to learn more, I see on the screen you have Design for Delight Level 1. Those are all open source classes that are paid for by Intuit, a lot of our funders, very generous ones. Cannot say enough about Verizon. Verizon has just transformed thousands and thousands of people's lives that I've seen in the last few years alone. But a lot of what they're building out are resources to help small businesses recover, to help under-resourced people that maybe don't have access to technology, to not only survive, but to thrive. So I would encourage anybody, if you want to learn more, do that. If you want to follow me on Twitter, my Twitter handle is Rebecca Corbin 7. So I usually post things every day. You can be assured there will be nothing political on my Twitter feed, and they will generally all be positive or informative, because I try to very much inhabit that space. So I enjoy the people that I follow, and I encourage everybody, if you want to, have uplifting, sometimes silly things, but it's all really about, not about the me, it's about the we, and the work that we're doing together to make communities stronger.
Absolutely. I love it. I love it. Well, Dr. Rebecca, before we wrap up, one question that I always love asking every guest that comes on, because, when you've had such a rich experience and there's so many great things that we've talked about, but in conclusion, what are two things that you would call the guest's attention back to as you reflect on your experience or anything that you've already said? What are two things you would like to leave us with?
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for asking that question. It's a great question. So I would say number one, community colleges. There's over 1,100 of them across the country. They're not 13th grade. They're not for your neighbor's kid to attend. They are there for everyone. So it's a starting point for people that maybe want to save money, that don't want to pay 4 years of university tuition. It could be somebody who has a graduate degree or CPA like you do, or a law degree, that wants to learn how to start a business. There's a lot of what they call lifelong learning, continuing ed. Be a speaker, volunteer, teach as an adjunct, as I have done many times over the years, and you'll fall in love with the students, I'm sure, like I did. So community colleges, find out where your community college is and think about how you might get involved and help the work that they do, or have them help you advance what you're doing. Secondly, I cannot say enough about the SBA. I have been so impressed with Administrator Isabel Guzman, who was confirmed by the U.S. Senate earlier this year. I have found her to be so approachable. She has her staff working on a number of different things. I happen to be invited to one of their panels that's supporting an equity agenda, and they want to go out into the communities across the country and make it easier for small businesses to get loans. So I would say to you, it's been a challenging time for political conversation, but have hope that there are really good public servants that are out there that care very much about people. And I know people have, differing views and differing opinions, but I can tell you, when the government says they're there to help, that's sort of a joke, but I have been refreshed and renewed in what I've seen from some public servants, across the past year or so. I just encourage people to find out what's available and take advantage of those resources as well.
Absolutely. Well, Dr. Rebecca Corbin, thank you so much for being an amazing guest. It has been a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you for inviting me. I hope you have a good day.
Thank you for tuning in to the Business Talk Library. If you like our content, be sure to follow us on social media. And if you want to see more of our exclusive content, you can subscribe and become a member on patreon.com/Business Talk Library. Hey, the Business Talk Library is the place